The photograph arrived at exactly 4:17 in the afternoon. It came quietly, without warning, the way most life-altering things do. One moment the room was filled with the soft mechanical rhythm of hospital equipment, the steady beep of a heart monitor, the slow drip of an IV, and the next, my phone lit up on the tray beside my bed. I almost didn't look at it. At 80 years old, 17 days into a hospital stay that had begun with what I had assumed was simple chest discomfort and escalated into something far more serious. I had learned to ignore interruptions. Everything in a hospital is an interruption: sleep, thought, dignity. A notification hardly seemed worth the effort. But I looked anyway. And there it was. My house. Not a similar house. Not one like it. Mine. The deep front porch, the familiar angle of the steps, the railing I had repainted myself 10 years earlier when the wood began to fade. And there, just at the edge of the frame, unmistakable even in a small digital image, the fig tree. My fig tree. But that wasn't what made my hand go still. It was the sign, planted firmly in the center of my lawn, as if it had every right in the world to be there. A real estate sign. No worse. Not the kind used by neighborhood agents with smiling headshots and optimistic slogans. This was different. Stark. Functional. The kind used by developers. Acquisition signage. The kind that doesn't ask. The kind that assumes. Below the image was a message from Eugenia. Harriet, is this right? I did not respond. I did not call her. I did not call my children. Instead, I did what I have always done when confronted with something that does not immediately make sense. I observed. Carefully. Completely. Without emotion, at least at first. I enlarged the photograph. Studied the angle of the sign. The depth of the shadow it cast on the lawn. The slight tilt suggesting it had been placed recently, not yet settled by weather or time. Then I took a screenshot. Created a folder. Dated it. Saved the image. The process was automatic. Muscle memory built over decades. Order first. Reaction later. Only after the folder was created did I allow myself to think the obvious thought. Someone had listed my house. I had spent 29 years working in a law office that specialized in real estate. Not as a lawyer. Something more precise than that. I was the person who read what others signed. The person who checked what others assumed. The person who understood, often before anyone else in the room, what a document truly meant. So when I looked at that photograph, I did not see a sign. I saw a process already in motion. A listing agreement. Authority granted. Intent formalized. A transaction underway. And I knew with absolute certainty one thing. I had not signed anything. The nurse came in a few minutes later. She asked if I needed anything. I told her no. She lingered a moment longer than usual, glancing at the monitor beside my bed. I realized my heart rate had changed. "Are you all right, Miss Harriet?" she asked. "I'm thinking," I said. She smiled politely, the way people do when they don't understand that thinking can be the most active state a person can be in. When she left, I picked up my phone again. Scrolled through my contacts, and called the only person who would understand the situation without explanation. "Philip," I said when he answered. "It's Harriet." There was no surprise in his voice. No unnecessary concern. "Tell me," he said. "I'm in the hospital," I told him. "And I believe someone has listed my house." A brief pause. Then simply, "I'll pull the title." That was all. No questions about whether I was sure. No reassurances. Just action. That is why you call the right person first. The house at 4412 Abercorn Extension has been mine since 1980. I bought it when interest rates were high and expectations were low. When people still believed a woman alone needed justification to purchase property. I had neither justification nor hesitation. It was a craftsman bungalow built in the 1940s. Not perfect. Not modern. But solid in the way things built with intention tend to be. The floors were original heart pine. They creaked in the same places every morning, like an old friend clearing its throat. The front porch was deep enough to sit through a full summer afternoon without the sun reaching your feet. And the backyard. The backyard had nothing in it at first. Just open ground. Until I planted the fig tree. A small thing then. Barely more than a stick with ambition. Someone at the office had told me figs were easy. She was right. What she didn't say was that they were also patient. Over the years, that house became something more than an address. Not sentimental. I am not a sentimental woman. But precise. It became the place where everything in my life was accounted for. Every document. Every memory that mattered enough to be retained. Every small, repeated act that eventually becomes a life. And now someone had placed a sign in that yard, as if it were simply a piece of land waiting to be reassigned. My children had visited during my hospital stay. Garrett called regularly from Atlanta. Efficient conversations. Updates. Logistics. Sylvie came in person. She brought flowers. Tulips one day. Yellow. Fresh. She sat beside my bed and talked about ordinary things. Her daughter's school play, a new restaurant, the weather shifting earlier than expected this year. She asked about my discharge timeline. At the time I thought it was concern. Now I understood it differently. Timing matters in real estate. It matters even more in decisions made without permission. Eugenia came the next morning. She did not knock before entering. She never has. She sat beside my bed and folded her hands neatly in her lap. I didn't know whether to send it, she said. You did the right thing, I told her. She nodded once, satisfied. The sign went up Friday, she added. Friday. I did the math immediately. 6 days after I was admitted. 6 days. Not a rushed decision. Not panic. A plan. After she left, I began writing. Not emotionally. Systematically. Dates. Times. Events. I wrote the way I had worked for decades, building a record not for how something felt but for what it was. Day 4. Likely listing agreement signed. Day 6, sign installed. Day 9. Offer likely accepted. I did not yet have confirmation, but I knew the sequence. Real estate has rhythms. Once you understand them, they become predictable. And predictability is power. Philip called the next morning. He had already begun pulling records. It's legitimate, he said. Executed under power of attorney. I closed my eyes briefly. Not in distress. In confirmation. Of course it was. The power of attorney. I had signed it myself 2 years earlier. Carefully. Deliberately. As I do everything. It authorized my children to act on my behalf if I was incapacitated. The word mattered. Incapacitated. Not inconvenienced. Not temporarily hospitalized. Incapacitated. There is a difference. A legal one. A meaningful one. And now, that distinction had been blurred. Intentionally or not. The buyer? I asked. Development firm, Philip replied. Offers below assessed value. Price to move quickly. Of course it was. Garrett would know exactly how to do that. Not maximize value. Maximize speed. Speed limits interference. Speed reduces questions. Speed ensures completion before resistance forms. It was efficient. It was calculated. It was not accidental. When is closing? I asked. Philip paused. 4 days after your projected discharge. I almost smiled. Not because it was amusing, but because it was precise. They had built a window. Small enough to act. Large enough to complete. Narrow enough to avoid me. It was, I had to admit, well planned. I hung up the phone and looked around the hospital room. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. The 4-line remained in place. Everything about my body suggested limitation. But my mind was exactly where it had always been. Clear. organized, working. And one thought settled into place with complete certainty. This is not over. I did not sleep that night. Not because of fear. Fear is a disruptive thing, loud, insistent, chaotic. What I felt was quieter than that. More deliberate. It moved through my thoughts the way ink spreads through paper. Slow, controlled, irreversible. I lay in the hospital bed listening to the monitor trace my heartbeat in steady intervals and began, piece by piece, reconstructing the situation. Not what I felt about it. What it was. There is a difference. By the time the sun came through the blinds in thin, pale lines across the floor, I had already reached a conclusion that did not comfort me, but did clarify things. This had not been a mistake. Mistakes hesitate. Mistakes leave gaps. This, whatever this was, had structure. Philip called at 8:45 the next morning. He did not waste time. The listing is filed, he said. Properly executed under the power of attorney. Witnessed. Notarized. Clean on its face. On its face, I repeated. Yes. That phrase matters more than most people understand. Something can be clean on its face and still be fundamentally wrong beneath it. Walk me through it, I said. The power of attorney I had signed in March of 2021 had been straightforward. I remember the day clearly, not because it was significant at the time, but because I have always remembered documents. Rosalind's office had north-facing windows. The light was even, neutral, the kind that doesn't distort what you're looking at. I had read every page. Twice. That is my habit. It always has been. The clause in question was standard, so standard in fact that most people wouldn't have paused on it. My agents Garrett and Sylvie were authorized to manage, sell, or otherwise convey my real and personal property if I was determined to be incapacitated. The word again. Incapacitated. Defined not by inconvenience, not by temporary illness, but by the inability to manage one's own affairs. At the time it seemed reasonable, practical, responsible. I signed it without hesitation, and I had not thought about it again until now. The activation? I asked. Supported by a letter from your cardiologist, Philip said. I was quiet for a moment. Does the letter certify incapacity? No, he said carefully. It confirms hospitalization following a significant cardiac event and ongoing treatment. I let that sit. That's not the same thing. No, Philip agreed. It isn't. But it was enough. Yes. There it was. The space between what something means and what it allows. That space is where most damage happens. They moved quickly, Philip continued. How quickly? Listing agreement signed on day 4 of your hospitalization. Day 4. I closed my eyes briefly. Not in distress but in calculation. Wednesday admission. Thursday, Sunday paperwork. I could see it now. Sylvie sitting somewhere. Perhaps her kitchen table, perhaps an office. Documents spread out in front of her. Pen in hand, the blue ink she has always preferred. Her handwriting looping slightly at the edges, the way it has since she was a child. I taught her that. At the same table in the house she was now selling. The offer? I asked. Accepted day 9. And the price? $318,000. I let out a slow breath. Below assessed value. Aggressively. Not recklessly. Garrett would never be reckless, but deliberately. A number designed to attract immediate interest. To remove hesitation. To move the process forward before scrutiny could catch up. And closing? I asked. Scheduled for Monday. 9 a.m. I did the math automatically. 4 days after my projected discharge. 4 days. Enough time for paperwork. Not enough time for resistance. I almost admired it. Almost. After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Not thinking about Garrett. Not yet. I thought about Sylvie. That is what surprised me. Garrett's actions I understood immediately. He had spent decades in development. To him, property was not emotional. It was strategic. He would look at the house and see value, timing, opportunity. He would tell himself, truthfully in his own way, that he was acting in my best interest. People in his position often do. It allows them to proceed without hesitation. But Sylvie was different. Or I had believed she was. She had sat beside my hospital bed, held my hand, brought me soup, asked about my discharge date with what I had assumed was concern. Now I understood something I had not understood then. She was gathering information, not maliciously, not coldly, but with certainty. And certainty can be more dangerous than calculation, because certainty does not question itself. I was 34 years old when I found it the first time. A junior clerk, still proving myself, still learning what mattered. I had been reviewing a stack of documents, routine, unremarkable, when I noticed the discrepancy. A boundary reference that didn't align. A detail most people would have skipped. I didn't. I brought it to Harold Aldrich. He looked at it, considered it, then said, "Good catch. Note it. File it. It's immaterial." And I did. I wrote the note, filed the document, moved on, and forgot about it. Until now. "Philip," I said slowly, "if that discrepancy is still in the chain, it creates ambiguity," he finished. "Yes. Not enough to invalidate ownership," he added, "but enough to raise a question. And questions are where transactions begin to unravel. Can we use it?" I asked. A pause. Measured. "I think," Philip said carefully, "we can make their title company very uncomfortable." That was enough. Not certainty, not victory, but leverage. And leverage used correctly is everything. "When is closing?" I asked again. "Monday, 9 a.m. I looked at the clock on the wall. Thursday morning. 3 days. 72 hours. That was all. After the call ended, I closed my eyes. Not to rest. To think. 3 days to interrupt a process that had been moving for over a week. 3 days to introduce doubt into something designed to move quickly and quietly. 3 days to reclaim control. When I opened my eyes again, the room felt different. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. There is a moment in situations like this, a precise, almost invisible shift when you stop reacting and start acting. I had reached it. Picked up my pen, opened the notebook, and wrote one sentence across the top of a fresh page. "Find the break in the chain." Then I underlined it. Once. Carefully. Because I knew something now that I had not known at 4:17 on that Tuesday afternoon. Eugenia returned that afternoon. She brought nothing with her this time. Not flowers, not food. Just herself. She sat in the chair beside my bed and watched me for a moment before speaking. "You look like you figured something out," she said. "I have," I replied. She nodded. "I thought so." I told her what Philip had said. Not everything. Just enough. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back slightly in the chair and folded her arms. "That's not right," she said. "No," I agreed. "It isn't. What are you going to do?" I considered the question carefully. Then I said the only honest thing. "I'm going to stop it." It sounded simple when I said it. It was not. Stopping a real estate transaction already in motion is like trying to redirect a train that has already left the station. Possible, but only if you understand exactly where to apply pressure. And when. Philip called again the next morning. Earlier this time. There was something different in his tone. Not urgency. Focus. "I've started pulling the full chain," he said. "Anything unusual?" "A few things," he replied. "Nothing conclusive yet." "Keep going," I said. "I am." He paused. "I'll call you tomorrow." That night I did not try to sleep. Instead, I began building a record. Not in my phone. On paper. I had a notebook, navy blue hardcover, the kind I have kept for years. I wrote everything down. Dates. Names. Details. Not because I couldn't remember, but because memory is not evidence. Records are. Sylvie called that evening. I watched the phone ring. Let it ring. Listen to it stop. A moment later, the voicemail notification appeared. I did not open it immediately. I finished the line I was writing first. Then I pressed play. Her voice was warm, gentle. Hi, Mom. I just wanted to check on you. I hope you're feeling better today. Let me know if you need anything. I love you. I saved the message. This wasn't about stopping a sale. It was about proving that the sale should never have been possible in the first place. And those are two very different things. By Thursday afternoon, the situation had changed. Not visibly. Not in any way that someone standing on my front lawn would have noticed. The sign was still there. The house still stood. The process from the outside would have appeared to be moving forward exactly as planned. But inside the system, inside the part that matters, something had begun to resist. Philip filed the procedural challenge at 4:30 p.m. It was not dramatic. No courtroom. No raised voices. No immediate halt. Just a document carefully worded, precisely placed, entering the record at exactly the right point to begin creating friction. That is how most important things happen. Quietly. Correctly. At the right time. The challenge itself did not stop the sale. Not immediately. That was never the expectation. What it did was introduce a question. And in real estate, a question, properly documented, is often enough to slow everything down. Title companies do not like uncertainty. They do not move forward when something is unclear. They pause. They review. They reconsider. And time, once introduced as a variable, begins to work against whoever is rushing. I understood all of this. I had spent nearly 3 decades watching transactions succeed or fail, based on details smaller than most people would ever notice. A misplaced comma. An outdated survey. A signature that appeared where it should not have. Details matter. And once doubt enters the room, it does not leave easily. But time was still the problem. The closing was Monday morning. The challenge would take longer than that to be formally reviewed. We needed something faster. Something direct. Philip's assistant sent over the full listing documentation late Thursday evening. I reviewed it from my hospital bed with the same care I had applied to thousands of documents before it. Listing agreement. Purchase contract. Acceptance. Signatures. Dates. Everything was in order. Technically. Which made it more dangerous. Because technically correct actions can still produce entirely wrong outcomes. The timeline was clear now. Day 4. Listing agreement signed. Day 9. Offer accepted. Monday, closing scheduled. Each step placed with intention. Each decision moving toward a single result. Completion. I studied Sylvie's signature for a long time. Blue ink. Looping letters. The same hand I had guided across lined paper at the kitchen table when she was 6 years old. I remembered correcting her grip on the pen, telling her to slow down, to form each letter deliberately. She had learned well. Too well, perhaps. I set the papers aside, not in frustration, in clarity. This was no longer about what had happened. It was about what could still be stopped. Friday morning came quietly. Hospitals always feel different on Fridays. There is a subtle shift in rhythm. An anticipation of the weekend. A slowing of urgency. But for me, urgency had never been higher. Philip called at 8 a.m. I've sent someone to pull the original 1987 filing, he said. Good, I replied. And I've requested confirmation of the title insurance underwriter. That was the key. Not the buyers. Not even the attorneys. The underwriter. The one entity with the authority to say no. Do we have a name? I asked. Yes, he said. Local underwriting manager assigned to the file. I waited. Constance Teal. The name landed with a quiet certainty. I hadn't heard it in years. But I knew it immediately. Memory does not always return gradually. Sometimes it arrives whole, complete, unmistakable. Constance had been 27 when she walked into Aldridge and Marsh. New, focused, slightly overwhelmed in the way capable people often are when they first realize how much there is to learn. She had needed someone to teach her how to read a chain of title. That someone had been me. I'll call her, I said. Philip hesitated. I can handle that. No, I said gently but firmly. This one is mine. A pause. Then quietly. Yes, it is. There are moments when experience matters more than procedure. When the right voice at the right time can do what formal channels cannot. This was one of those moments. I spent the next hour preparing. Not emotionally. Practically. I opened my notebook. Reviewed my notes. Checked dates. Confirmed details. I wrote out the key points not because I needed to read them but because writing clarifies thought. 1987 filing. Adjacent transaction. Boundary reference. Iron pin. 1991 survey. Pin relocated. No corrective deed filed. Discrepancy remains in chain. Clear. Precise. Undeniable. At 9:30 a.m. I made the call. The hospital room was quiet. The monitor steady. The 4-line adjusted carefully so it would not interfere with my writing hand. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. Then she answered. Hello. Constance, I said. This is Harriet Alderman Poole. A pause. Recognition moved through the silence. Harriet, she said. My God. I heard you were in the hospital. I am, I replied. And I need to discuss a file you're currently underwriting. Another pause. Shorter this time. Focused. Tell me. That is the difference between professionals and everyone else. They do not waste time on surprise. They move directly to substance. I explained the situation. Not quickly. Not slowly. At exactly the pace required to ensure understanding. I described the 1987 filing, the adjacent subdivision, the boundary reference, the resurvey in 1991, the absence of a corrective deed. I gave her the language as I remembered it, not because my memory is exceptional, but because some details once learned properly do not leave you. She did not interrupt. I could hear her writing, occasionally the faint turn of a page. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Not uncertainty. Processing. If what you're describing is accurate, she said finally, then the applicability of the power of attorney to this conveyance becomes arguable. It does, I agreed. And there's already a procedural challenge on file? Since yesterday. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll pull the chain myself, she said. Thank you. I'll need to review the original documents. You should. And I'll consult with senior counsel. That would be appropriate. There was one more brief silence. Then she said something that told me everything I needed to know. I'm glad you called me directly. So am I replied. We ended the call. I set the phone down carefully on the tray, looked at my notebook, and placed a small check mark beside the final line. Call completed. It was not victory. Not yet. But it was movement. And movement in the right direction is what changes outcomes. The rest of Friday passed slowly. Time behaves differently when you are waiting for something that matters. It stretches. Not endlessly, but enough to be noticed. Sylvie called that afternoon. I watched the phone ring. Let it go to voicemail. Again. Her message was longer this time. Warm. Concerned. Detailed. She spoke about my recovery. About visiting again soon. About bringing something I liked. She said nothing about the closing scheduled for Monday morning. Nothing at all. I saved the message, added it to the folder. Not out of anger. Out of habit. Records matter. Even when they are incomplete. Especially then. Saturday morning arrived with a different kind of quiet. Hospitals on weekends feel suspended. Less urgent. More contained. But my world had narrowed to a single point of focus. Monday, 9 a.m. Philip called at 8 o'clock. He's got the full 1987 documentation, he said. Good. And the notation is there. Exactly where you said it would be. I closed my eyes briefly. Not in relief. In confirmation. Read it to me, I said. He did. The language was exactly as I remembered. Archaic. Precise. Uncorrected. And when he reached the boundary reference, I stopped him. That's the corner pin, I said. The one they moved. Yes. We were quiet for a moment. Two people looking at the same problem from different places. Reaching the same conclusion. Can they miss it? I asked. If they're not careful, he said. But now they won't be. That was the point. Not to prove something no one knew. To make sure the right person looked closely enough to see it. Time? I asked. Less than 48 hours. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. Then we wait, I said. But waiting in this case was not passive. It was the final stage of a process already set in motion. The call had been made. The documents had been reviewed. The right question had been asked. Now it was in the hands of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. That afternoon I sat by the window. The light was different on weekends. Softer. Less clinical. I watched it move across the floor and thought about the house. The front porch. The fig tree. The small, precise details that make a place what it is. Not valuable. Not marketable. But real. I did not think about Garrett. Not yet. I did not think about confrontation. Or explanation. Those things would come later. Or they wouldn't. Some conversations are not worth having until the outcome is secure. Sunday would come next. Then Monday. And somewhere between those 2 points the outcome would be decided. I closed my notebook, set the pen carefully along its spine, and let the room grow quiet again. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything that needed. Sunday passed in a kind of stillness that felt deliberate. Hospitals always slow on Sundays, but this was different. For me, time wasn't drifting, it was narrowing. Every hour brought the situation closer to a single moment. Monday, 9 a.m. A conference room on Bay Street. A transaction that, on paper, was complete. And a question that had been placed carefully in its path. I slept that night. Not deeply, but enough. Sleep before something important is not about rest. It is about readiness. And when I woke at 5:30, I felt exactly that, ready. The floor was quiet. The night staff moving through their final rounds. The soft hum of machines filling the spaces between footsteps. Breakfast came at 6:30. Eggs that were not quite eggs. Toast that was not quite toast. I ate it anyway. Routine matters. Even when nothing else does. At 7 a.m. my phone rang. I did not need to check the screen. I knew who it was. Harriet, Constance said. Her voice was steady, professional, certain. That was the first sign. I went through the chain myself, she continued. All of it. I sat upright in the bed, notebook open, pen in hand, not because I needed to write, but because I always write. And? I asked. A brief pause. Then, the discrepancy is material enough to hold the title commitment. There it was. Clear. Unambiguous. Final. I wrote it down anyway. Commitment pulled. 7 a.m. Then I underlined it once. It will require a corrective deed, she said. How long? At least several weeks. That was more than enough. Without a title commitment, the transaction could not proceed. Without the transaction, there was no sale. Without the sale, the house remained where it had always been. I'll notify both parties' counsel this morning, Constance added. Thank you, I said. She paused. Don't thank me, she replied. You taught me how to read a chain. I considered that for a moment, then said, You read it well. We ended the call. I set the phone down on the tray table, looked at the ceiling, and waited. The feeling when it came was not what I expected. Not relief, not satisfaction. Something quieter. A stillness. The kind that comes when a problem has been solved correctly. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Correctly. At 8:40 a.m. the formal notice was sent. I know the exact time because Philip's office forwarded it to me. Subject line. Withdrawal of title commitment. Precise. Efficient. Final. At 8:52, Ironwood's closing attorney called Philip. I was not on the call, but I know exactly how it went. I have heard that tone before. Measured irritation. Professional inconvenience. A day recalculating itself in real time. Is this resolvable? He would have asked. Yes, Philip would have said. How long? Weeks. A pause. Then acceptance. Because that is how it works. At 9 a.m. the closing did not happen. No signatures. No exchange. No transfer. Just a room full of people realizing that something they had expected to complete would not. Garrett was in that room. I learned that later. He had flown in the night before. Arrived prepared. Confident. Certain. I try even now to imagine the moment from his perspective. The attorney receiving the call. The shift in tone. The explanation. The realization. Certainty dissolving into something less stable. According to Philip's paralegal, Garrett's expression changed more than once. Quickly. As though recalculating. Adjusting. Searching for an alternative path. There wasn't one. Not immediately. He left before 9:15. He did not call me. I was discharged 3 days later. Thursday morning. Dr. Krishnamurti stood at the foot of my bed, reviewing his notes with the calm efficiency I had come to appreciate. Your numbers are excellent, he said. Limit strenuous activity. Follow up in 30 days. I will, I replied. He looked at me for a moment. You've been very composed, he said. I had something to take care of, I told him. He nodded as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. Eugenia drove me home. She had cleaned her car. I noticed immediately. Said nothing. Some things are understood without being spoken. We drove through the city in morning light. The world continuing as it always does. Unaware. Unchanged. When we turned onto Abercorn Extension, I looked toward the house and saw something I had not expected. The sign was gone. I turned slightly in my seat. When? I asked. Tuesday morning, Eugenia said. The day after the closing failed. Pictured it. Eugenia at 77. Standing in my yard. Post-hole digger in hand. Removing something that did not belong. Quietly. Without ceremony. You should have told me, I said. You had enough going on, she replied. Then after a moment, you would have done the same. She was right. I would have. The house felt exactly as it should when I walked in. Not unchanged, but consistent. The air held the same weight. The floors the same sound. The refrigerator, the old Frigidaire, let out its familiar soft sigh when I opened it. I stood in the kitchen for a moment longer than necessary, listening. Not for anything new. For confirmation. Everything was still there. Everything was still mine. That afternoon I walked through each room. Not inspecting. Not checking. Reacquainting. The way you do when returning to something that has always been yours, but has briefly existed outside your reach. In the backyard, the fig tree had begun to fill in. New leaves. Bright. Certain. Unaware of any of it. I stood there for a long time, looking at something that had taken decades to become what it was. Something that could not be hurried, could not be reassigned, could not be understood by someone who only saw value in terms of transaction. Thought simply, this is mine, not as a declaration, as a fact. I met with Rosalind the following Monday. Her office was exactly as I remembered. The same light, the same order, the same quiet attention to detail. I brought my notebook, my records, a list. I want to revoke the power of attorney, I said. She nodded. I assumed you might. And I want a new one drawn. Who will you name? Eugenia, I said. And Philip. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Trust is not a feeling. It is a conclusion. The documents were prepared. I read them. Twice. Then signed. Pressed my notary seal into the paper with deliberate pressure. The impression clean. Permanent. Final. Letters were sent. Through counsel. Factual. Complete. Unemotional. They did not accuse. They did not argue. They recorded. That is all they needed to do. Sylvie called 3 times that week. I let the first 2 go unanswered. The third time I picked up. We spoke for 40 minutes. I will not repeat that conversation in full. Some things belong where they happen. But I will say this. She did not apologize for what she had done. She apologized for how it had affected me. Those are not the same. Garrett did not call. Not immediately. The corrective deed took 6 weeks. Surveyors, attorneys, reviews, corrections. It was not simple. It was not inexpensive. But it was done properly. When the final document was filed, Philip sent me a copy. I printed it. Placed it in the drawer with the original purchase documents. 2 pieces of paper. 44 years apart. Saying the same thing. The chain was clean. The record corrected. The question removed. The transaction that almost happened. No longer possible. Not then. Not that way. And yet, that was not the part that stayed with me. Not entirely. What stayed was something else. Something quieter. Harder to resolve. Sunday afternoon. The day before the closing. Sylvie had sat beside my bed. Brought me soup. Held my hand. Spoke about ordinary things. All while knowing what was scheduled for the next morning. I have replayed that hour many times. Examined it. From every angle I understand. I have found no version of it that sits entirely right. The legal matter was resolved. Cleanly. Completely. But that hour. That remains. The corrective deed was filed on a Wednesday morning in late May. There was nothing dramatic about it. No announcement. No visible shift in the world. Just a document recorded in the proper office, placed exactly where it belonged in the chain of title. A correction. Quiet. Precise. Final. Philip's paralegal emailed me a copy that afternoon. I printed it on the small Canon printer in my study, the one that has sat on the same desk since 2012, and held the paper for a moment before placing it down. 2 pages. Dense. Specific. Completely clear. The legal description had been corrected. The reference point aligned. The chain, which had carried a small imperfection for decades, now ran clean from 1941 to the present. My name appeared where it should. Exactly where it had always been. I placed the document in the second drawer of my desk. The same drawer that held the original purchase papers from 1980. 44 years separated those 2 documents. And yet they said the same thing. Without ambiguity. Without question. The house was mine. I did not celebrate. There was no need. Some things are not victories. They are restorations. Life resumed in the way it always does. Not with a dramatic return, but with small, consistent movements toward normal. June came early that year. Warm. Steady. The fig tree produced its first fruit ahead of schedule. Small at first. Then more. then enough to fill the kitchen counter with quiet abundance. I made preserves. The same way I always have. Figs, sugar, a half lemon, cooked slowly in the enamel pot that once belonged to my mother. There is a rhythm to it. Patience. You cannot rush preserves. You cannot force them to thicken before they are ready. You wait. You stir. You watch. And eventually they become what they are meant to be. I filled 6 half-pint jars. Kept 2. Gave 2 to Eugenia. Left 1 at Philip's office. No note explaining why. He would understand. Garrett called in mid-June. A Sunday afternoon. I noticed the day. I always notice the day. I let the phone ring once. Twice. Then I answered. His voice was careful. Measured. Different from before. "I've been thinking," he said. "I imagine you have," I replied. A pause. Then, "I told myself a story," he said, "about what was best for you." I did not interrupt. "I didn't check that story against what you actually wanted," he continued. There it was. Not an apology. Not entirely. But something closer to truth than anything he had said before. I listened. Quietly. Fully. Then I said, "I hear you. That is all. Not forgiveness. Not resolution. Acknowledgement." We spoke for a few more minutes. About nothing in particular. The conversation did not fix anything. But it opened something. And sometimes that is enough to begin. I have not decided what comes next with Garrett. Some fractures mend. Some remain. The difference is not determined in a single conversation. It is determined over time. By action. By consistency. By truth. Sylvie and I speak less. When we do, the conversations are careful. Polite. Measured. There is a distance now that did not exist before. Not hostility. Not even anger. Something quieter. More permanent. She never said she was sorry for what she did. Only that she was sorry it upset me. That distinction matters. It always will. Eugenia comes every Tuesday. That has not changed. She brings sweet tea in white-mouth mason jars. Because she believes glasses are too formal for a porch. We sit in the wicker chairs that have been there since 1992. We talk about ordinary things. Her granddaughter. The weather. What's growing? What isn't? And sometimes, we say nothing at all, which is its own kind of conversation. By late summer, the fig tree produces its second crop. Smaller fruit. Sweeter. The skin thinner. The flesh darker. It comes off the branch with a slight resistance, then releases all at once. You learn to recognize the moment. Too early and it isn't ready. Too late and it's gone. Timing matters. In more ways than one. One Thursday morning I went out early to pick them. The grass still damp. The light just beginning to settle. I filled a small basket. 2 pounds perhaps. Enough. Standing there, I thought about how long it takes for something to become what it is. A tree. A house. A life. You cannot rush those things. You cannot shortcut them. And you cannot hand them over without understanding what they actually are. Back inside, I went to the study, opened the drawer, took out the file, the original deed, the corrective deed, and a printed copy of the full chain of title. Clean, complete, annotated in my own handwriting, because I am the kind of woman who annotates. I always have been. I read the document again. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to. The legal description was correct. The language precise. Every word exactly where it should be. And there, in the granting clause, my name, clear, undeniable, recorded. I know what that document says. I have always known how to read such things. It does not say anything emotional. It does not speak of memories, or time, or care. Says simply, that I am the owner, that this land, this house, this place, belongs to me, not as a feeling, as a fact. I placed the document back in the folder, closed it, set it carefully in the drawer, where it will remain until it is needed again, or not. Then I picked up my phone, opened the folder I had created weeks earlier, dated, organized, complete. The photograph was still there. My porch, my fig tree, the sign. I looked at it for a long moment, not with anger, not even with disappointment, but with clarity. It had served its purpose. It had shown me what I needed to see. I deleted it, closed the folder. I am not a woman who keeps what she no longer needs. That morning I went into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator. The old Frigidaire gave its familiar, quiet sigh. The same sound it has made every morning for 44 years. I made coffee, stood by the south window, watched the light come in at its usual angle, the one that tells me I have about 2 hours before it's better to sit on the porch. There is comfort in that, not in repetition, in reliability. Outside, the fig tree moved slightly in the breeze. Full, established, exactly where it has always been. And I thought, not as a conclusion, not as a statement, but simply as something true. This is mine. Not because I fought for it, not because I proved anything, but because it always was. And now, it is again.